Now the natural trend of that is toward the spine, and there the presence of God's great love sleeping at the base of the spine, and the Kundalini power is aroused. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so that great love of God, His omniscience within us, His fullness is aroused. Then we feel and know that love is the greatest force in the universe. As His love moves, comes up the spine, and then expands into the great Spirit of God, then we have that expansion of consciousness. We realize that we are one with that great love of God. Having that separate existence from Him is unbearable. So you can see it is so necessary to find this greatest love. Now let us, just for a moment, speak about conditioned love, the drawbacks of circumscribed love. Now you feel so much for those who are near you, your relatives and friends, and those of the family. You feel so wonderfully toward them, but that love is conditioned. That's not unconditional, because when they're taken away, you feel sad. When you lose things in this life which you love, you feel sad. That's conditioned love. But if you will expand that unconditioned love, that conditioned love, into the all-pervading, unconditioned love of God, you will not lose those people. You will not lose that love when they pass on, or when things are taken away from you, because those things came from the great love of God. How can you lose? And you remember when the Master, his mother, passed away, he told me I was going to kill myself. Such was his love for his mother, but it was circumscribed, it was conditioned, but he found the answer in the unconditioned love of God. There he found his mother in each and every one, because that's unconditioned. Everything came from that love of God. You will find everything, including those near and dear to you, in that omniscience of God. So you see how necessary it is that we find this greatest love. We must expand this circumscribed love into the great unconditioned love of God. Now going on just a bit, a few illustrations of the fullness of God's love. We must not forget this. We must not lose sight of this. God loves us. He gives us freely of His unconditional love. And so, that is why we read in Matthew, the 3rd chapter. Matthew, the 3rd chapter, 37th to 40th verses, these things which we must never forget. 22nd chapter, I beg your pardon. 22nd chapter, 37th to 40th verses. This is what we read. Jesus said unto them, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, and this is the second. Now God loves us unconditionally. He doesn't demand anything from us, does He? He goes on and loves us. He lets us live and enjoy His gifts. He just, as the Master says, waits for us. So God loves us that way. We must love others the same way. We must love others the same way. First, we must love God because we have forgotten Him. I am somewhat against thee for having left me. So we must love God that way. And then the second is, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Whomever crosses your path is your neighbor. if you have the realization of the eternal flame of God, and the power of that flame is love, then you can love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I said in the beginning, this love is the greatest force in the universe. It is the force of all forces, and it says just that in this last verse. On these two commandments, it cannot be any clearer. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets.